Welcome back to Fighting a Fourth, your home for all things Commander. Around here we like to celebrate the politics, power plays, and legendary moments that make Commander the best format in Magic. Today we're going to be going over a deck tech for Aang at the Crossroads. This is a deck that I have recently put together, and it's quickly grown to become a really fun deck for me to play. I originally was not a fan of most of the decks that I've seen, like versions that I've seen online or even in person. A lot of people like to play like the all clones version, which I don't love. And I finally put together a list that I think has a good balance of everything that makes this commander so good while not being too one note, because I think that's the issue this deck can have, is that if you just play all clones, it kind of just does the same thing. And I don't really know what the end goal is for the all clones version, but this version I think has the most balance between like clones, blink effects, just ways to really take advantage of Aang's really good ETB. Speaking of the commander, Aang lets us cheat into play off of his trigger. So if you don't know, Aang, when he enters the battlefield, you look at the top 5 cards of your library and you can put a creature card mana value 4 or less onto the battlefield. This is an extremely broken ability. Looking 5 deep and mana value 4 is pretty much perfect for what Aang is trying to do. Mana value 4, you can really get some really good valued creatures at 4 mana value. So I think this is like an underrated ability. I mean, he does cost 5 mana, but we are in green, so we're not lacking the ability to ramp. So it happens pretty quick and it starts to snowball out of control. The deck itself is, I would consider, like just traditional battle cruiser kind of deck. You're just using Aang to amass a ton of value really fast, but ultimately the deck is just going to combat and swinging and outvaluing our opponents over the course of the game. It's not looking to combo, it's not looking to do anything too crazy with Aang himself, other than just using him to milk value out of our own deck. So we immediately get the value as soon as he plays. It's not an attack trigger. That's usually a lot of what happens with commanders with attack triggers, is that they don't have haste, and so you have to survive a whole turn cycle, and then you're a turn behind your opponents. Aang will get the value immediately, and if you hit a clone, if you hit a blink effect, you can repeat the value immediately. And so on turn 4, turn 5, when you're casting Aang, it's like you will immediately see the value from Aang ETBing, which I think is great. I think strong commanders are fun, and this is certainly one of them. So we kind of touched on the two big themes of the deck, which are clones and blink. Those are the ways that we're going to keep accruing value from Aang by constantly flickering him or cloning him. The other part is this land matters kind of build that I've gone for, and that's just because Aang does have a flip side. I don't bother even reading it when I play Aang, because the intention is never to really flip him. His other side does not do anything too great. He gives land creatures vigilance, which isn't terrible for us, but not something we're looking to do right away, nor something we're looking to do at all, really, but it is there. We're mostly looking for land creatures matters on other cards. Other cards give them flying and other forms of evasion that we don't really have to rely on Aang's vigilance for that. The front side is much stronger and much better. He's much better staying on the front side. So we do have land matters creatures in the deck and some spells to protect the land creatures themselves. Pretty much all the creatures, but we have there's like one enchantment that gives all lands indestructible, which is really cool because that makes all of our land creatures indestructible. So that's kind of like a sub theme to that. And then obviously we just have like good ETBs in general. So all of our value is kind of coming out of ETBs, because that's what our deck is really going to be taking advantage of the most through Aang's own ETB, or for our other creatures as well, because again, we have like a blink theme, so we're able to blink not only Aang but maybe other pieces as well when the time calls for it. Some pros and cons of the deck are really that Aang just lets us cheat such large creatures into play, and I mean large as in their mana value. 4 I think is huge for mana value. If you cast Aang with 5 mana and you cheat in a 4 drop, you've just put 9 mana spells into play with only 5 mana available to you. You're already breaking, such a large you're already snowballing into such a large advantage ahead of your opponents that way. And just casting him is doing that. Just his ETB is doing that for us. And I tried to make a mix of clone and blink effects. That way we can start to vary our strategy a little bit in the late game, because once we've kind of churned through a lot of our deck, a lot of the Aang triggers will start to whiff because we've dumped out a lot of our creatures, so we're left with just spells, which Aang unfortunately cannot cast off of his trigger. So we can start to pivot to just flickering and blinking or cloning some of our other pieces that will get us more value in the late game. And I love that we can kind of change that on the fly, right? You can kind of do that as needed, or you can hold up. That's usually why I hold up the instant speed blink spells, not necessarily to trigger Aang, but to save it in response to somebody trying to do something, so that we can then, dodge a board wipe, or potentially at least get more value before someone swings at us, whatever the case may be. Like a lot of commander decks, Aang is a key part of the deck. Without Aang, the deck still does some cool stuff. It's still a blink clone kind of deck. And again, like I said, there's a lands matters build part that Aang doesn't really take a huge part of. So the deck does function without him, but obviously we're just doing it at the normal pace of casting everything the hard way instead of cheating it into play with Aang. And sometimes when you pull the top 5 of your deck, you'll see like a cool piece that you might need. You'll see like the Ephemerate, or you'll see a Shaya, and you'll be like, damn, I really don't want to put this to the bottom, but it is what it is. It has to go to the bottom. That's just the nature of decks sometimes. Luckily, there's a lot of repeat effects in the deck, so we're not too reliant on like one card really getting us there, but that's that's part of the fun of a deck like this, is kind of figuring out like, when is a good time to blink Aang, or do you just rely on like the old-fashioned card draw and casting spells the hard way. Just of note, if there are ways for ETBs to get shut off, your deck will be completely useless. That is sometimes that's just how it is. Decks have like one type of card that will shut them down completely, and this one is in fact shutting off ETBs. So watch out for Elish Norns. Keep Beast Within in hand because they will stop everything that we're trying to do. So we'll break down some of the card draw in the deck. Again, everything in the deck is based a lot in the creatures that we're running, and that's just because Aang can cheat them into play, so it's very easy for us to get these out for free, essentially. Tatiova, the only one here who actually isn't able to get put in off the Aang trigger, but that's okay. Tatiova is just such a good card draw engine. I felt like she needed to be here. But Dowerport Mage is like a really good card draw engine in this deck. I draw so many cards when Dowerport Mage is out. It's only 2 mana, so if we see it early, that's even greater. We could just hard cast this as we're setting up, and that's another reason why this deck is so fun. With Aang at 5 mana, there's like 3 or 4 turns that you're going to get of just setup, and sometimes you can just hard cast some of these setup pieces before you're ready to deploy Aang and just start getting the value that way. So Dowerport Mage is one of those cards. Joriel is another one. She will let us draw our land creatures off when they deal combat damage. And it's great because she herself will make us a land creature on the beginning of combat. So you can even play this turn 4 before we cast Aang, create a creature with flying, it has haste, swing with it, draw a card, and then the next turn we cast Aang, do it all again. So sometimes we're drawing, 3-4 cards a turn off of Joriel, depending on how many land creatures we have. And there are other cards in the deck that will give these land creatures even more evasion. So it's just a lot of synergy with the deck. You'll see a lot of cards that kind of just care about, again, land creatures themselves, and that's what we're doing here, is we're building kind of a land creatures matters deck using Aang as kind of like the value engine to get all those pieces out. We talked about Tatiova. She's a little bit slower card draw because, again, there's no like burst, put 20 lands into play kind of card in the deck, but I think Tatiova is just one of those cards over the course of the game will slowly get you value, and people hate using removal on something like Tatiova because she's not necessarily winning you the game very obviously, but it's just a slow accrual of value that over the course of the game that'll be like, damn, I think Tatiova has drawn like 10 cards, like we probably should have killed her. And then I have the Legend of Kyoshi as like the kind of big burst card draw if we need it. We tend to have some large creatures with our like our earthbent creatures. They can grow pretty fast. Other cards in the deck will grow and earthbend at a high rate, so the Legend of Kyoshi can kind of get us there with a lot of card draw, which I think is really cool. You know, I threw it in there as like a little bit of flavor. You know, I tried to use as many avatar cards as possible without it just being like an avatar only deck, so kind of felt like it was a good fit. Interaction. This is probably the weakest part of the deck, and that's just because I didn't rely too hard on like our traditional counter spells and our traditional like interaction. I wasn't running a ton of I am running some removal, again, some pretty standard ones with like Path, Swords, Beast Within. I'm running like Heroic Intervention just because it's such a good card, but I tried to find interaction that was a little bit different. So Earthshape is one of those cards. Earthshape, I think, is kind of an underrated card in general, but I think in this deck it works really well because even just by itself, if we have no other Earthbent creatures, Earthbend 3 protects Aang because he is a 3/3. So him and all of his clones are also 3/3. So Earthshape will at least protect those value pieces. It may not protect all of them, but at mana value 4, like I said, that's kind of like the most common number that we're looking for in this deck. Most of our creatures are going to be saved by Earthshape. So I think for 3 mana, save all of our creatures, and it gives ourselves hexproof randomly if that tends to matter. Hasn't come up yet, but maybe there's a world where it does. And we're ready for it. But Appa is like the key card here of like, that's just a really cool way to dodge board wipes, and it also will re-trigger all of our ETBs if we need to, so we can kind of use him to get more value that way as well, which I think is really cool. So I threw Appa in here. It's a great card. I think I'm hopeful to see this card just played in general, but through a lot of decks, because I think it's such a cool effect. But in this deck, it really synergizes well with the ability to re-trigger ETBs. And again, we're in green ramp, so there's really nothing crazy here. We're running all the standard ramp for green, but we're also using some pretty cool ETB style ramp, because again, that's something that we can really take advantage of and abuse in this deck. So I'm running Badger Mole Cub. Flickering this is great because we'll be able to continuously Earthbend with it, and this also just turns on all of our other mana dorks. So we're running like the Bloom Tender, Faber Elder type of mana dorks, and then obviously our Earthbend creatures are also going to tap for additional mana. So Badger Mole Cub really doing a lot of work over the long game, which I don't have to tell anyone. Again, Badger Mole Cub is a great card and everyone knows it. So Clifftop Lookout is another card that's great for us because we can just flicker him. He randomly has reach, so he makes like a good blocker in a pinch. And then we have other cards of similar value. So we have like the Wood Elves and Farhaven Elf that just get our lands when they're flickered. Overlord of the Hauntwoods is great. We can cast it for 3 mana, get the cool little tapped land that taps for every color, and then flicker it, and it loses all those counters, and now it's just a 6/5 for 3 mana, which is great. So another great card. I think in certain decks it shines really, really well. On this one, it's just kind of a cool thing that we can cheat it into play, not off Aang, but off of, you know, other flicker effects that we have. So a little different, I did want to touch on like all the clones that we had in the deck, because again, I want to highlight that we're only running 4 clones in the whole deck, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not the whole theme of the deck. The deck is not running like 100 clones, which is like what some versions have been running, and that's fine, and those versions do cool things, but this is not that kind of deck. I am just running 4, and all 4 of them are the ones that don't kill Aang when they ETB, because again, I'm just not looking for that kind of play style. So we're just running Chameleon, both Sakashimas, and Spark Double. They are all hittable off of his ability, which is perfect. And just for note, for when you play this deck, the copies of Aang do not flip. They have the text that Aang does on the front side, but cards that don't have like flip sides cannot be flipped. So none of the clones will ever flip, so you don't have to worry about like triggering those Aangs and flipping them and worrying about losing the cool text that he has. Like, that's not what the clones can do. So we're just worried about real Aang flipping, and it's easy to avoid flipping him by flickering him himself, and so he loses the, if he see, because just so everyone knows, the Aang flips when he sees another creature leave the battlefield. On the next upkeep, you transform him. But if you flicker him and then don't flicker any other creatures, he'll never see other creatures leave the battlefield, so he doesn't ever flip again, if that makes sense. So like I said, the deck, we don't want to flip Aang. The front side is much, much better. So the clones don't flip, and we can just avoid flipping our commander other ways. And then same thing, I just kind of want to go over all the different big chunks of the deck and the creatures that are helping us do that. And so now we're going to cover the land creatures matter part of the deck. And these are all of our earthbenders and some of our older cards that reference land creatures that definitely got a huge buff with all the earthbending support in Avatar. So we have Toph. Toph is just super, super broken, especially in a deck like ours where we're really abusing those like ETB go get land creatures. So Toph's number of experience counters goes up really fast. We earthbend that much, that creature becomes a huge threat. Ashaya, don't have to tell people Ashaya is really good. Turning every one of our creatures into lands really turns this deck on, because all the lands or all the creatures that we're hitting off of Aang count as lands, which trigger all of our landfall abilities. And GOT is just a nice way to pump all of our land creatures, because he's not very big, but even just giving +2/+2 to our whole board, if like Ashaya is out, is enough to probably close out a game. And then Avatar Kyoshi, just a huge a huge earthbender on combat. At the beginning of combat, we just earthbend 8, so we just put 8 counters on a creature and swing. It's nasty. So we have Tatiova, Steward of Tides here. If you don't know that one, that's like the other Tatiova that gives land creatures flying. We talked about Joriel already. She's the one that draws us cards off of the land creatures dealing combat damage. And then Boomy is a similar effect to Yoti. He puts 2 +1/+1 counters on every land creature at the beginning of combat. So again, like I said, a lot of the same effects that we're running in the deck. The idea is eventually to just create a large board of creatures with counters on them and just go and swing. We'll go over the game plan for the deck, and first things first, the goal is to cast Aang. So we're looking for early game ramp in our opening hand. That'll let us get him out a turn early on turn 4. As soon as Aang ETBs, we're going to get value. He's going to hit a creature. It technically is possible to whiff. I haven't done the hypogeometric calculator to figure out exactly the number of creatures, so I'm guaranteed to hit every time, but it's possible. I have whiffed. I usually whiff later in the game when I've thinned the deck of all the creatures, but it is always possible to whiff. But again, it's very unlikely, and as soon as you get something cheated into play, you've already gotten value from Aang. Once we start doing that, once we start getting value from Aang and seeing what he's putting out, it's just protect our board and life total. It's people are going to start seeing the value that we're getting and start seeing that we're accruing lands, creatures, blink effects, card draw engines, all these things, and they're going to be like, okay, well, we'll start targeting you. So you have to really start interacting when needed and just keep flickering Aang. That's the goal. Like I said, people are going to want to stop you, but if they can't, or if you interact with them and stop them from interacting with you, then that's a win for us, because Aang is going to get us the value. I assure you the deck will do exactly what it wants to do. You just have to keep Aang alive. But if we lose Aang, it isn't the worst thing in the world, because if we do have clones of him on board, that's great, because then if we hit other clones, we can just target the cloned Aang, and those clones will enter as a copy of Aang, and we'll still be able to do the thing. So it's not the end of the world. If we do lose Aang and there are no clones, the deck does a good job of ramping, so it's not impossible to recast Aang. But just know the deck is pretty resilient. It's not a glass cannon deck by any means. Only when ETBs are shut off, that's about the only way this deck really falls apart fast. And then the last thing to cover is really just our key cards / win cons, because that's kind of all lumped in together. Ashaya really helps the deck because she turns all of our creatures into lands, and we have so much land creature support that now all the buffs in our deck are being applied to every creature that we have, and it just usually spells GG for our opponents at that point. Ouroboros is a card that needs no introduction. It is a beast of a card, and in this deck it does the same thing. It's only 4 mana, so we can hit it off Aang, and once it's on board, I really look to start trying to clone it, because with clones of Ouroboros out, they just start to snowball so impossibly out of control, and it's actually terrifying. So I sometimes I've seen Ouroboros, like I've looked at the top 5, like the very first trigger of Aang, and I see an Ouroboros there, and it's like so tempting to put it in, but I know that it's not going to last very long. And so if there's another option in my hand, I'll or in the top 5 that I've looked at, I'll put that one out instead. If it's the only hit, I also just said that I've whiffed, and I chose to put it at the bottom because, again, I think if you put it out too early, people are going to start seeing the value. They're like, okay, I see what's going to happen now. We're about to just get destroyed by an Ouroboros. So you have to be careful putting it out too early, and sometimes it has to go to the bottom. Trust me, you'll dig fast enough, you'll get it again. And the great thing about Ouroboros is that it works really, really well with, I haven't mentioned him here because he's not really a super impactful card in the deck until like an Ouroboros out, but I'm running Black Panther, and that's just because we have so many, again, ETBs happening, and he starts putting counters on lands, which again is randomly super, super nice in our deck. But you pay 3 mana and you can move the counters from one land onto a creature you control. So I've done a game before where I've just kept putting a ton of counters on this random land, and then I finally hit my Ouroboros. I put him out, I go to combat, and before Ouroboros triggers, I pay the 3 mana to move all the counters onto the Ouroboros, and now Ouroboros is putting 20 counters on all my things instead of just the one. So that was really cool, a really cool interaction that I technically hadn't, or admittedly hadn't thought of when I built the deck. I just thought that the Black Panther was going to be like a slow accrual of over time. Like, oh, he'll put some creatures on some lands, you know, it's like pseudo earthbending, and oh, it draws life if you put a bunch of counters on something and you draw 1 card. Like, okay, 3 mana, draw 1 card, it's not great, but like it's there. But didn't really think about the Ouroboros synergy, so it worked really well. We touched on it before about Brago. Brago is just the best blinker of the deck. He really just is able to do the whole board at one time, so we don't have to just choose like 1 or 2 pieces. He can literally blink everyone that wants to be blinked and then get all their value again, and he's so good. He is flying, so he's got natural evasion, which just means he's likely to connect with somebody. And Starfield Vocalist is just the like roaming throne of the deck. We have so many different creature types that we can't really take advantage of something like roaming throne, but we don't need to. We have Starfield Vocalist, who will double all of our ETBs, so that's double the amount of land tutoring for our, you know, Farhaven Elf and Wood Elves. It's double the amount of Aang triggers. It's double the amount of, you know, Charming Prince effects, if that's what we're looking at. So it's really, really cool. I really found this deck to be just a ton of fun to play. I think when you find a deck like that, it really just resonates with you, because there's a time in Magic where you start to, you know, care a lot about winning, and you win a lot of games, or you're, you know, really having to fight to win games, and that feels great. But finding a deck that's just fun to play, win or lose, is honestly such a great feeling, and that's what this deck feels like for me. I don't love the aspect of this deck that happens when Starfield Vocalist comes out, though, which is that it can start to feel a little like solitaire, because Starfield Vocalist comes out, maybe you know, trigger Aang, now he has 2 ETBs on the stack, you put 1, you look at the top 5, you find a clone, that clone comes in, you put 2 more Aang triggers on the stack, look at another 5, get a blink effect, blink Aang, 2 more Aang triggers on the stack, so you see where that goes. I try to resolve them as fast as possible. You know, if you're playing with friends, hopefully they understand. If you're playing with strangers, maybe just apologize, because I don't know. It's unfortunate that it's one of those things that will happen. Luckily, Starfield Vocalist is the only thing that doubles ETBs. I didn't put like Panharmonicon in the deck. I wanted to kind of keep the deck focused on the 4 mana creature thing, but you certainly could definitely add those types of effects into the deck and really make it pop off. But so just know that the deck has potential to start to feel a little like solitaire. But again, I think if you just work on resolving the triggers fast, it lightens the hatred that your opponents will fear for you a little bit, and then just have fun playing it. I think this is one of those decks, like I said, that surprised me. It's not something I traditionally play. I stayed away from clones and blink for a long time, not for any particular reason. It's just something that I didn't think appealed to me. And so playing this deck, I started to see, like, now I know why like clone and blink decks are so popular, because they're so fun, and every game never feels the same, even though people may think that. They think like, oh, Aang's triggering again. Okay, he's going to hit a clone. He's going to hit Aang. He's going to clone Aang, and then he's going to do it again, and then he's going to hit another clone, and then he's going to hit another clone. And the deck doesn't always do that. Even if I hit a clone, then I hit something else, and then I hit a ramp spell, and then I hit this, and then I hit something that blinks, and then I blink something else instead of Aang to get more lands. It's a fun deck. that's all I can say. So I think, if you are questioning or have thought about building this commander and just needed the kind of push to do it, here it is, because I have had a blast playing this. This is probably going to be the deck I pull out most days, just as my first deck, because it's not overly complex. I don't have to worry about combos or remembering lines or figuring out the perfect combination of spells to get there. It's just play Aang and put creatures into play. So thanks for joining us on Finding a Fourth. If you enjoyed today's Commander Chaos, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment about what you think of the deck. I want to hear your thoughts. Maybe you've built this deck too and have some ideas for me to try. I'm always open and looking to improve my decks. So always remember, whether you've got a full pod or you're still searching for the last player, you can always come hang out with us here at Finding a Fourth. Until next time.